It's that as humans, we have a very limited vision. We're subject to all kinds of laws that prevent us from being able to see the full entirety of creation. And so when we look at the world like through a paper towel roll, and we see only this much, of course it looks difficult. There's a wonderful story of three men who are taking a walk in the forest, and they decide to rest in the afternoon. And one of the men says to the other two, you know, this idea of God, I really don't buy it. And the other two say, well, what do you mean? And he says, well, the plan just is so clearly faulty that there really can't be a divine God taking care of all this. And the other two men say, what do you mean? And he says, well, look over here. We have a pumpkin plant. And these pumpkins are these huge, heavy, big things. And what has God given them? These tiny little flimsy vines to hold them up. And then we have these little mangoes, half a kg of mango. And what has God given? A huge big tree with big thick branches to hold up these mangoes. And he says, clearly, this is backwards. Clearly it's the big, thick, heavy pumpkin that needs a tree and big branches to hold it. And clearly the flimsy little vines would have been fine for the mango. And one of the two men says, wow, you're right. Never thought of it like that. The third man says, well, I don't know. I hear what you're saying, but I still have some faith. I still think there must be some kind of a plan. So the two non-believers leave the believer in his illusion, and they go off to sit under another tree. And all three men lay down to take their afternoon naps. And while they're napping, an afternoon storm comes. And it blows the wind. And one of the mangoes from the tree falls on the face of the non-believer. And he wakes up with a start. And he says, oh my God, I was so wrong. And the other men say, what do you mean? And he says, thank God he put those big, heavy pumpkins right close to the ground. And that up in the air, he put these tiny little mangoes. Because when this little half kg mango fell onto my face, it really hurt. And I can't even imagine what it would have felt like to have one of those pumpkins come down on my head. So it's all about vision. It's all about being able to see either the narrowness of a pumpkin and a mango in their vines, or the vision that says, well, sometimes storms come. And when storms come, they knock fruit off of trees. And so what really should we put up there? One of the greatest keys to that spiritual connection is to have that faith that says, I may not be able to see the full picture, but I realize my ignorance. I realize it's there. And there must be a plan. Another last aspect of this that I want to touch upon is something that was raised last night, which I think is a really important issue. Somebody raised the issue of feeling like we don't deserve happiness. And this concept of self-hatred, of feeling worthless, of not allowing ourselves on some level to fully embrace what the world has to offer. Where does that come from? Well, most of it comes from the voices in our own heads. We have voices in our heads that say to us, you're worthless, you're stupid, you're ugly, you can't do anything right. And we've identified those voices as our self. We've heard them for so long that we think it is self, but it's not self. They're voices of our parents, an aunt, an uncle, a fifth grade teacher, a neighbor. We didn't come into this world with those voices in our head. Somebody put them there. And one of the greatest keys to finding that happiness is to be able to distinguish self from not self. And those voices are not self. We may borrow our younger sister's sweatshirt for years, and we wear it every day, and we love it, and we sleep in it, and we think it's ours. But the day we go off to college, or the day we move out of the house, she's going to remind us, hey, be sure to leave my sweatshirt, because it's hers. And yet, the people who put those voices in our heads are all too happy to let us carry them with us for our entire lives. And so we go through our life thwarting ourselves. We want to start something. No, don't do that. That's not for you. You're not good enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not smart enough. You're not worthy enough. You're not spiritual enough. And these voices are one of the greatest impediments to our path. And the only answer is to identify them for what they are. And the only way to do that is to sit in meditation. And it doesn't matter what form of meditation you practice. All that matters is that you're able to sit quietly and sit stilly for long enough that another voice starts to spring. And that's the divine voice. And that's a voice that says something very different than all the other voices. And it's a voice that's not screechy. It doesn't shout. It doesn't repeat itself over and over again ad nauseum. It's a quiet voice, and it's a gentle voice. And it's a voice that says, you are divine. But we have to sit still long enough to hear it. And when we can hear it, then we can identify the other voices and say, oh, that is my fifth grade teacher. Oh, that was my grandmother. Oh, that was this person. And what we realize then is those are not some omnipotent, omniscient, divine voice that has stamped us as worthless or ugly or stupid for our lives. It's a voice of someone else who was confused, who was scared, who was angry, who was jealous, who had all kinds of their own issues. And distinguishing that is one of the most important things we can do. There's a wonderful true story told about His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He had gone to America and had given time to meet with the top American Buddhist meditation teachers. Those who had been teaching Buddhist meditation for decades, many of whom had been monks themselves. And as the teachers sat with His Holiness, one of them asked him, how can we address this issue of self-hatred in the people who come to us? And evidently it took His Holiness's translator 10 full